So the first thing you do is take your wire tool and wire off a section of clay from your bag. And there you go. So this is maybe 5 pounds or something like that. You don't want it too big, because if you're trying to wedge 15 pounds, you're going to run into problems with being able to control that much clay, unless you just have the brute Hulk strength. So 5 pounds is a great size to wedge. 3 pounds, and then once it gets to, say, maybe a half a pound or something. So for me, my hands are big enough that a half a pound just fits into the palm of my hand, and it's very hard to get control of that small of an amount of clay. So for me, it's better to wedge at least a pound and then cut it in half. So the first thing that I always do is just sort of round it out a little bit, pat down the corners, and then the movement that you want for what's called a ram's press, a ram's head movement, is your palms going down and in, but you keep control of the outer edges of the clay. You don't want them to spread out. You want to keep them from moving outwards, and you just move in just a little bit, down and in, and then rotate it back a little bit more, maybe a quarter of a turn, and do the exact same thing. And then so what you're doing is you're pressing in the part that you just rotated. So if I rotate this here, you can see there's 2 imprints from my palms. And then what I'm going to do is rotate it back and then push those down in again. Push down and in, down and in, and then keep your palms in to prevent the clay from moving outwards. Because a lot of times when people start, they'll just not use the outsides of their palms, and they'll just hold the clay like this and smush down, and then the clay is coming out along the edges here, and it'll become this long log type shape. So keep the ends of it inside, don't allow it to spread out, and it's just a little bit of movement at a time. You're not trying to smash half of this clay down into the table. All you're doing is taking a portion of it, say 20% of it, and then moving it down and in a little bit, and then down and in a little bit, and then what you're doing is you're creating a layer over layer over layer over layer, and then if you look at the edges, you'll start to see the spiral form. So you're only using a little bit of this at a time, a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. You're not trying to smash the whole thing. So for about 5 pounds, once you've done this, 15 or 20 times, you'll start to see that any of the air bubbles have come out, and you'll get the spiral around the edge, and you'll be good. Now when it comes straight out of the bag, you'll see now you can see the spiral pattern in there, and the more you do it, you could get that pattern tighter and tighter. I'm not too much worried about it because this just came out of the bag. Generally when these come out of the bags, they don't have any air in them, so you don't have to worry too much. I have taken the clay straight from the bag, put it on the wheel and thrown it and been fine. But if you don't align those particles, you'll get what's called S-cracks in the bottom. Aligning the particles of clay is very important to get those platelets moving together to prevent cracking. So then once I have that, I will round the edges off. So that little spiral has tons of little bitty cracks in there. You could get air in there. So what I do is flatten it and then roll it around so that you get this nice rounded, no cracks. And then one thing that I do, instead of using the clay like this, if this were a ball that I were going to throw with, I would not put it on the wheel like this. I would rotate it up perpendicular to the way that the spiral is. And I saw that from Bill Van Gilder. It said it helps to prevent S-cracks, so that's the way. So this is a ball that would be ready to throw, or you could cut it in half and pat the corners and use half of that for throwing. So the next type of wedging is called spiral wedging, and it's more like kneading bread. So we're going to move everything into a spiral. So the clay gets wedged a little bit at a time, the same way as the ram's head press. But this is, so I'm going to take one corner and I'm going to hold my hand on the other side to keep it from moving outward. I'm going to press in just a little bit, and then I'm going to rotate it and pull it up a little bit and press down just a little bit. I'm not trying to press the entire clay down into the thing. I'm not trying to smash it into the table. I'm only moving 10% or 8% of the clay at a time down into the bottom of it. And so I'm pushing down into this area, rotating, pushing down into that area, rotating, pushing down into that area, rotating, pushing down a little bit, and twisting at the same time. Now when you first start doing this, this thing's going to walk all over the place. It's going to walk all around the table. That's okay. Just over time you will figure out how to rotate it, push down a little bit, rotate it, push down a little bit, and you'll get it so that it doesn't move around all over the table. But when it does in the beginning, that's fine. Just let it walk around a little bit. Who cares, right? So over and over and over, I'm just going to keep turning this, pulling it back a little bit, pushing down a little bit, turning it, pulling it up, pushing down, turn, pull back, push down, turn, pull up, push back, push down, over and over until you can get a rhythm going. You can do this over and over and over. Now with a larger piece of clay, you don't have to move the entirety of the thing. You can only do the edge of it if you want to, like only work with this much clay instead of the entirety of it. And just keep pressing down into that over and over and over. You'll start to see the seashell's shape taking place in the middle. Now, the way that you press into the clay, if you press too much or you're only using the very corner of your hand and pushing down, you're going to get all of these little ridges in there and you're going to have more of a chance to get air. So you want to be pressing into this along these lines to get those out of there. And so if you're leaving big chunks like this, like if you press in with your hand too hard, you want to be pressing more with your palm of your hand so it's a smoother movement and it doesn't have that big hump in there every time you push down, or you're going to leave these ridges in there, and those ridges are really prone to putting air bubbles in your clay. So the more smooth those lines can be, and I'm actually pressing down and in with my left hand. I'm not smashing with my right hand as much. This is more of a control hand. This one's the one that's actually doing the pushing down in. And that starts to prevent those big cracks from forming on the other end. So once you get this rounded more and more and more, you'll start to see those lines are smoothing out. And over time, maybe 15 or 20 just like the other one, you'll start to see that spiral in there. And then in the same way, now I take this and roll it out so that it doesn't have those edges. Flip it up, smack it down, and then roll all of those cracks out of there, and then you should end up with a pretty smooth bottom without all of those cracks in there. And then the same as before, I like to do it perpendicular to the way that the spiral is going. So I smack in this side here, smack in that side there, and then that'd be ready to throw on the wheel.